Imagine coming home from a 3-week business trip, exhausted and ready to collapse into your own bed, only to find that your suburban home has been converted into a literal X Games arena. I opened my front door and was met not with the smell of home-cooked food or the quiet hum of the air conditioner, but with the deafening sound of grinding metal, the stench of fresh plywood, and a cloud of sawdust so thick I could barely see the stairs. My 12-year-old son and his 3 best friends hadn't just been hanging out while I was away. They had ripped up the hardwood flooring in the entire open-concept living room, dismantled my mahogany dining table for parts, and built a massive, professional-grade skate park right in the middle of the house. There were quarter pipes blocking the kitchen entrance, a grind rail bolted directly into the floor where my sofa used to be, and my son was currently mid-air, attempting a kickflip off the fireplace mantel. I stood there, my suitcase dropping from my hands, watching my life savings and my home's resale value literally being shredded under polyurethane wheels. Was I wrong for what I did next? Or would you have absolutely lost your mind too? I need you to tell me if I overreacted, because my family thinks I'm a monster, but I think I'm the only sane person left in this house. Let's go back to how this nightmare started. I'm a single dad, and I work in high-end architectural restoration, which means I travel a lot. My son Leo has always been a bit of a rebel, but he's a good kid at heart, or so I thought. He's obsessed with skating, which I've always supported. I bought him the best boards, the best pads, and I even built him a small ramp in the backyard. But apparently, the backyard wasn't enough. About a month ago, I got assigned a massive project 3 states away. It was a 21-day contract that would pay enough to finally clear the mortgage. I couldn't leave Leo alone, so I arranged for my younger brother, Marcus, to stay at the house. Marcus is 24, a freelance graphic designer, which is code for unemployed, and lives on my couch when he can, but he's always been great with Leo. I gave Marcus a strict set of rules: no parties, keep the house clean, and make sure Leo does his homework. I even left them a massive budget for groceries and emergencies. I thought I had everything covered. I checked in via FaceTime every night, but looking back, I realize now that Leo and Marcus were always sitting in front of a very specific, neutral-colored wall in the basement during our calls. I asked why they weren't in the living room, and Marcus would just laugh and say the lighting was better for the camera. I was so tired from working 14-hour shifts that I didn't question it. I didn't notice the power tools humming in the background, or the fact that Leo was wearing a construction vest in one of the calls. I just thought they were working on a school project. While I was away, sweating over blueprints and historic moldings, a literal construction crew of middle schoolers was invading my home. Apparently, Leo had convinced Marcus that I had given him permission to start a small interior renovation project. Marcus, being the irresponsible idiot that he is, didn't bother to call and verify. He just saw it as a way to keep Leo occupied so he could play video games all day. It started small, just moving some furniture. But then Leo's friends, whose parents are apparently just as checked out as Marcus, started bringing over supplies. They used my own professional-grade power tools from the garage. They backed a truck up to the sliding glass doors and unloaded sheets of high-grade birch plywood. They spent the first week ripping out the carpet and the subflooring. They didn't just build on top of the floor, they integrated the ramps into the structure of the house. They used heavy-duty bolts to secure a transition ramp to the load-bearing beams. They even used my expensive industrial adhesive to coat the ramps for extra grip. By the second week, word had spread in the local skate community. My house wasn't just a home anymore, it was the indoor spot. Marcus told me later with a straight face that he thought it was cool that the kids were being creative and active instead of staring at screens. He actually let random teenagers into my house to test the flow of the park. They were filming TikToks, doing room tours of a skate park that was actually my living room, and even selling day passes to other kids in the neighborhood to fund more lumber. The level of detail was actually terrifying. They had built a fun box over the spot where my grandmother's antique rug used to be. They had fashioned a hubba ledge out of the marble slabs I had bought for the kitchen remodel. The sheer audacity of it is what kills me. They weren't just playing, they were engineering a destruction zone. Every time I think about the sound of those wheels hitting the wood, I feel my blood pressure spike. I spent 10 years making this house perfect. Every crown molding, every coat of paint, Every piece of furniture was selected with care. And in 21 days, a group of 13-year-olds with a circular saw and a dream turned it into a plywood wasteland. To make matters worse, they had even started tagging the walls. My custom mixed eggshell finish was covered in neon green and purple graffiti. Leo's lair was written in massive, dripping letters across the fireplace. They had moved my expensive leather sectional into the garage, where it was currently serving as a bed for a stray dog, just to make room for a 6-foot half-pipe. I noticed that the crown molding I had spent 3 months hand-carving was now being used as a support brace for a kicker ramp. The vibration from the skating had caused the plaster in the ceiling to crack, and dust was falling like snow onto the kitchen counters. The damage wasn't just aesthetic, it was structural. They had drilled through the hardwood and the subfloor directly into the joists to secure a steel grind rail that ran from the top of the stairs all the way through the dining room. I could see where the heat from the friction of the boards had scorched the wood. I stood there, paralyzed, watching as a kid I didn't know did a board slide across a rail that was literally bolted into my staircase railing. My custom-built banister, made of solid white oak, was splintered and scarred. The kitchen island, which had a granite countertop I'd imported from Italy, was covered in wax, skate wax, because they were using the edges for grinds. When I finally finished my job early and decided to surprise them by coming home a day ahead of schedule, I expected a welcome home hug. Instead, I walked into a scene from a nightmare. The air was thick with the smell of sweat and sawdust. There was music blasting so loud the windows were rattling. I saw a kid I didn't even recognize sliding down a rail that was bolted into my stairs. My son Leo saw me first. He didn't look scared. He looked proud. He yelled, "Dad, check this out," and launched himself off a ramp that was literally built over the kitchen island. He landed with a thud that I felt in my teeth. And that's when the silence hit. Everyone stopped. Marcus walked out of the kitchen with a soda in his hand, saw my face, and actually said, "Oh hey bro, you're back early. Don't worry, the kids are almost done with the pro section. I want you to really picture this. Imagine the one place where you feel safe, the place you work yourself to the bone to pay for, being completely unrecognizable." I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just stood there for a full minute, looking at the holes in my walls and the ruined floors. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice that would change everything. Before I tell you what happened next and how I handled the cleanup, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have joined in? Would you have kicked everyone out? Or would you have done something much more permanent? Tell me your honest reaction, because what I did next caused a rift in my family that still hasn't healed. After that minute of silence, the expert storyteller in me realized that words weren't going to fix this. I calmly walked over to the sound system, unplugged it, and threw the speakers out the open sliding glass door into the pool. The music died instantly. I looked at the 5 other kids in the room and told them they had exactly 60 seconds to get out of my house before I called the police and their parents. I've never seen teenagers move so fast. They grabbed their boards and bolted. Then, I turned to Marcus. I didn't even let him speak. I told him to pack his bags and be out by sunset, or I'd sue him for every cent of property damage and have him charged with child endangerment and trespassing. He tried to argue that it was art, but one look at my face silenced him. He was gone in 20 minutes. Then came Leo. He started crying, saying I was destroying his passion, and that I didn't understand skate culture. I told him that his passion had just cost me roughly $80,000 in repairs. I didn't just take his board. I went into the garage, grabbed my chainsaw, the one I use for clearing fallen trees, and I walked back into that living room. The first cut was through the main transition ramp. The scream of the chainsaw echoed through the hollowed-out house, drowning out Leo's protests. I felt a cold, calculated fury. This wasn't just wood. This was a symbol of total disrespect. I sliced through the plywood decks, the 2x4 supports, and the grind rails. Each roar of the engine was like a catharsis for my soul. I wasn't just cutting wood. I was cutting out the cancer of entitlement that had invaded my sanctuary. I moved to the quarter pipe that was blocking the pantry and sliced it into 3 jagged pieces. The sawdust flew everywhere, coating the walls and the ceiling, but I didn't care. I moved to the staircase rail they had ruined and began unscrewing the steel pipes with a massive pipe wrench, throwing the metal onto the floor with a deafening clang. I spent the next 3 hours systematically destroying every single ramp, rail, and platform they had built. I saw the hubba ledge they made from my marble. I smashed it with a sledgehammer, each blow shattering the stone into 1,000 expensive pieces. Leo had to watch from the hallway as I turned his dream park into a pile of scrap wood. Every time the chainsaw bit into the plywood, I felt a tiny bit of my sanity coming back. I didn't stop until the living room was nothing but a graveyard of splinters and bent nails. I worked until my arms were shaking and my clothes were soaked in sweat and sawdust. The house was quiet again, but it was the quiet of a war zone. But I wasn't done. I realized that if I just fixed the house, Leo wouldn't learn a thing. I looked at the wreckage and then at my son, who was sobbing in the corner. I told him, "The fun is over. Tomorrow the work begins." The next morning, I woke him up at 5 a.m. I didn't give him breakfast. I handed him a pair of work gloves and a crowbar. I told him we were going to clear the debris. He refused at first, sitting on the floor and sulking, but I told him that for every hour he spent not working, I would sell one of his possessions on eBay. He saw I was serious when I walked into his room and grabbed his limited edition sneakers. He followed me downstairs, sobbing. We spent the first week just hauling out the trash. We filled 3 massive construction dumpsters. My neighbors were staring, probably wondering why my living room was currently sitting on the curb. Every time a friend of his would bike past the house, Leo would try to hide. I wouldn't let him. I made him stand out there and haul the plywood. He had to face the embarrassment. He had to feel the weight of what he had destroyed. Day after day, it was the same routine. Wake up before the sun, work until the bus came, and work as soon as he got home from school. His friends stopped calling. The TikTok influencers, who were filming in our kitchen, vanished as soon as there was actual labor involved. For the next 6 months, I didn't hire a contractor. I made Leo do the work with me. Every weekend, every night after school, he was in that living room. He had to learn how to lay subflooring, leveling the joists that they had notched out to fit their ramps. I taught him how to use a circular saw properly, how to measure twice and cut once. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. He had to learn how to sand and stain hardwood, a process that takes days of back-breaking labor. I made him get on his hands and knees with an orbital sander for 8 hours a day on Saturdays. I made him scrape the graffiti off the walls by hand using a chemical stripper that smelled like citrus and regret. He had to learn how to patch drywall, sand the mud until it was perfectly smooth, and apply 3 coats of paint. I made him sell every single piece of gaming equipment he owned, his expensive mountain bike, and yes, all his professional skateboards to pay for the materials. We lived in a construction zone for half a year. We didn't have a sofa. We ate our meals sitting on plastic buckets in a room that smelled of primer and floor sealant. The house was cold, and the echoes were loud. My family's reaction was the hardest part. My sister called me abusive for making him do manual labor. She told me I was stifling his creativity, and that I should be proud of his engineering skills. I told her that if he was such a great engineer, he should have known not to bolt a ramp to a load-bearing wall. She actually tried to come over and take him to her house, but I told her that if she interfered, I'd send her the bill for the damages, since she was the one who encouraged Leo's creative side in the first place and even sent him a $20 gift card for supplies halfway through his build. My parents said I should have just talked it out and used the insurance money, but I stayed firm. Insurance doesn't cover. Your kid built a skate park while you were away. That's a domestic issue, not a natural disaster. By the end of those 6 months, the living room looked better than it did before. The mahogany table was replaced, not with a new one, but with a custom one we built together from the salvageable wood and some new timber. I taught him how to do wood joinery. We spent nights in the garage, not skating, but chiseling out mortise and tenon joints. Leo's hands were calloused, and he was exhausted, but he finally understood the value of a home. He learned that a house isn't just a building. It's thousands of hours of someone's life traded for money to create a sanctuary. He saw the sweat that goes into a single square foot of flooring. During the final month, something shifted. He stopped complaining. He stopped crying. He started asking questions about load-bearing weights and wood grain. He started taking pride in the way the new baseboards looked. He even pointed out a spot where the paint was uneven and fixed it himself without me asking. The aftermath was bittersweet. Marcus still hasn't spoken to me, which honestly is a win in my book. He tried to sue me for emotional distress and the loss of his gear because I threw his speakers in the pool, but the judge laughed him out of the courtroom when I showed photos of the living room. I actually countersued for the cost of the dumpster rentals and won a judgment that's currently garnishing his meager freelance wages. Leo eventually apologized, though he still looks at the living room floor with a bit of resentment. He hasn't picked up a skateboard since that day, which does make me a little sad, but he has started showing a real interest in carpentry and architecture. He realized he liked building things. He just had to learn that you can't build your dreams on top of someone else's destruction. The moral of the story is that boundaries aren't just suggestions, and sometimes, the only way to teach someone the value of what you have is to make them rebuild it from the ground up. It was a harsh lesson, and it cost me a lot of peace, but I'd do it all over again to ensure my son grows up respecting the effort it takes to maintain a life. He's now the only kid in school who knows how to install a dovetail joint, and while he might be the kid with the mean dad to his friends, he's a man in the making to me. This whole experience taught me that being a parent isn't about being your child's best friend. It's about being their anchor, even if that anchor feels like it's dragging them down sometimes. If I had let this slide, what would he have done next? Built a swimming pool in the basement? A dirt bike track in the attic? People told me I destroyed his spirit, but I think I just gave him a new one. One rooted in reality instead of a plywood fantasy. Like this video if you were on my side and think the chainsaw method was justified. Subscribe for more stories like this where things go absolutely off the rails. Share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Was I a monster, or just a dad at his breaking point? I'll see you all in the next story.